So you guys know I'm Anne. I flew in on an airplane on Wednesday. I decided my arms were too tired that day. So I've been here since Wednesday afternoon, and thank you for the Hawaii hospitality. And I am a cold weather girl myself, being from Vermont. So this is pretty hot to me. Anyway, so I'm here to teach a workshop on enamel. I'll be teaching a bunch of techniques. If you want, there's samples in the other room you can look at afterward. And next to it is a little selfless, what do you call that?
Self-promotion.
No, shameless. That's where shameless promotion. I also have some earrings for sale in there. But other than that, I'm going to start my story for you so you can find out the meaning behind the work that I do. Because even my earrings have meanings, all of them. They don't all have names, but they all have meanings related to my life. So I'm a CPA. And I always talk about things from getting from point A to point B. That's like something I say constantly in my life. So I said, that's got to be the name of my presentation. And then I had the search for meaning. And you notice how the search for meaning isn't like level. I couldn't figure out how to fix that in PowerPoint. And then I realized that's me anyway. I'm lopsided. I've got scoliosis. That's perfectly fitting for me. So it was a good thing I couldn't figure out how to solve it. Okay, so we will begin the lecture. Is that how it changes? No, this is another trick.
If you go down to the bottom right-hand corner, next to the minus sign, there's this little screen with a thing hanging down. Just click that, and it'll load.
Now just hit the return.
And then either you
Oh, now I need my arrow keys, right?
can use your user.
Does that look blurry?
No, it's like
Yummy. It's not really blurry. Okay, well, it shouldn't look blurry. But okay, so my mother was an alcoholic. And as such, this is the stuff she drank all the time. And she took it all out on me. I'm the oldest. So it had a dramatic impact on my life, the way I was treated. And, you know, when you're young, you don't necessarily put it all together. It just is. And you survive. But I made several promises to myself that I would never touch another human being and I would never drink. And they both are true for me. So while that was happening, you all remember that cartoon. It didn't occur to me that as I got older, even as a teenager, no matter what I did or watched, I couldn't not cry. And I'm a migraine sufferer. And I would get a migraine from every time I cried. I always found the underdog, and I was on that person's side because I realized that was me. I was the underdog in my whole life because my mother was the ruler. And that's when my life was able to like begin to make more sense, why I could not ever get through a movie without bawling my eyes out. Even if it was for the planet, something was the underdog in every movie I watched. And I had this epiphany that that's why. It was because of how I felt growing up all the time. So then I was a CPA. I became an accountant, and I loved my profession until I decided I couldn't lie for all these people anymore. You have to lie all the time. If they make too much money, you gotta not show so much profit, so they pay less taxes. If they make too little, you have to lie and make the numbers bigger so that they don't blow the covenants with the banks and anyone else that was lending them money. So I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I decided to become a glass bead maker. And the glass beads, they weren't colorful enough. So I had to add enamel to my work. And that's what really changed my life. I took an enamel workshop in 2007 with the goddess of enamel, Linda Darty. And yes, and my life changed after that. I knew in 2 hours, the first 2 hours of that workshop, that I had every penny was worth every penny for being there, and that my life was going to take a new direction. I just knew. And this was I'm not sure why this is in this order. Something seems out of order. Let me just, with PowerPoint, you can only go forward, right? You can't go back?
You can go back.
Let me see something here for a second. Oh, yeah. I guess not. Just like, let's pull out some slides. Oh, let me go back. So I started doing craft shows in 2003, 2004, something like that. And I was not making enough money. I was not getting into the shows I wanted to get into or anything like that. And everybody kept saying, Anne, you have to make a body of work. You have to make a body of work. You can't just make a piece because you think it's great and use it for an image. You have to have a cohesive body. So this was my first attempt at a cohesive body, and it was named the Pigeonholed series. And the reason was because I felt like we were being pigeonholed into this way of presenting our work just so the jurors could make a decision in 5 seconds. That's all they are. I've gone to juries before. You get to look at this for 5 seconds and you have to make a decision that fast. So it has to look cohesive for them to make any kind of assessment of what they're looking at. And it worked. So I started to get into better shows. So I was not a teacher or anything at that time. I was strictly a craft show artist. And then after that, I started to reflect on the work I was making. And I lived in Yorktown Heights in New York, which is very close to this nuclear power plant, maybe 5 miles away. This is the most dangerous nuclear power plant in the entire country, because 50 million people live within a 50-mile radius. I mean, over 10 million people live within a 50-mile radius of this nuclear power plant with no accepted evacuation plan by the NRC. Okay, so friends of mine, when I was living there, started something called the Tooth Fairy, or became part of something called the Tooth Fairy Project. And what they did was they analyzed the teeth of children and to determine how much strontium-90 was in their teeth. But it turns out that's not about the strontium-90 in the baby, it's the strontium-90 in the mother that's actually being reflected in the teeth. So they discovered that the teeth had 58% higher than anywhere else, if you test around the country. So I decided that I wanted to start to build my work around the things that really bothered, planetary disturbances, I like to call them. And so that was the next body of work that I made. And did I miss slides? Now it won't go anywhere. Gotta get rid of that. Oh, it escaped me. Wow, what did I do? There you are. Okay.
It's probably hypersensitive.
I guess so. I don't know why this one doesn't have the titles on it. Okay, well, you see those towers that are present at all nuclear power plants in the dome? Well, that's what all these things are in my drawings. The domes, anything, wherever you see a dome or an arc, it's all about the nuclear power plant domes. So whatever thing you look at in there, that's what it's about. And you'll notice that the shapes kind of taper upward, and that's the towers that are there. So that's the representation that you'll see in my work when you see things that taper or you see domes. It's all a discussion of nuclear power. Obviously, it's not necessarily noticeable, but you'll also notice in both of these, right here, and that's a finger pointing at you to think about what your choices are. And the one on the left is called Japan, and the one on the right is Tower. The one on the right was made first. I made them both at the same time, but I didn't have a name for the left one until Fukushima happened, and then I knew immediately I had to name it Japan. And that's how that one got its name. Obviously, at all power plants is a hazmat symbol, and that bell-shaped thing, if you flatten it out, is the hazmat symbol, except it has a flare And I call it hazmat tolling because it's tolling for the nuclear power industry. This piece was made. Well, I started this piece at the same time I started all the ones you just saw, except I didn't believe I had the skills to set those stones. So it sat on my bench for 5 years. And then when I saw it there one day in December of 2015, I just happened to look at it because it had been laying there for so long I forgot about it. I looked at it, it's like, I can do that now. And so I picked it all up and it was all soldered. All that part was done. I hadn't set the enamel piece, but the prongs were soldered in, all that. I set all the stones, put the prongs on it, and it was ready to go. So that's the radius of Indian Point, again, about that nuclear power plant and that radius I was talking about of the 10 million people that are in harm's way. And again, you can see the dome. These are pretty steeply formed copper discs. And the opening, the center part, those are my space bacteria, my imaginary space bacteria, and the little circles at the bottom of the little legs, that's the baby's about to shoot off. So
What's the scale on this piece?
the width of that is about 3 inches. Anyway, so it's lunacy because when I made it, I looked at this right here and go, oh, that reminds me of the cover of Pink Floyd. And so, they have Dark Side of the Moon. And so I just decided, okay, it's got to be lunacy because it kind of plays on that. And I also have this philosophy that the only safe place back then, now I'm not so sure I believe this anymore, the only safe place to be if one of these nuclear power plants would blue is somewhere out in outer space. Now with all the space junk and everything else, who knows if that's really true, but you got to have faith somewhere, I suppose. Okay, so I have to work on the order here. That should have been a little bit earlier. I'm not sure how I got it out of order. I had been married, and he decided we should not be married anymore. So that was the knife, just like cutting it, and my life changed drastically right after that. And that's when I started really questioning being an accountant and whether I wanted to continue to do that. And it's funny how your life just really takes a completely different direction. I went from being a CPA to an artist, like almost overnight. I just said no and yes. I became involved with Greenpeace. I became involved with the Rainforest Action Network. I became involved with the Adirondack Mountain Club, and being a CPA, I became treasurer of the Adirondack Mountain Club for 5 years. And these types of issues are what drive my work, because I told you planetary degradation and disturbances are very pivotal in the work that I do. I can't help this. Guys, I better turn something. Okay. This was my next series after I did the nuclear series. I moved on to this series here, and it was called the Hakel Ocean series. And he has his art forms from the ocean, and I used those drawings to guide the metalwork that I did for the piercing and then the enameling shapes. And I absolutely am in love with this book. I could probably look at that book every day for the rest of my life and never get bored, because it's mathematical and at the same time it's art, and at the same time, for me, it discusses ocean degradation. So I decided to work on a body of work with that, and this one is called Metaphor for Death. So when I use, for me, when I do a lot of piercing and a lot of holes, it indicates fragility or things collapsing or falling apart. Even though when you look under a microscope, you'll see all the porosity and the holes and everything. I use it to represent things that are unstable. I use it as a metaphor for instability. The one on the left is a very interesting piece because all these edges here, you know how we're supposed to soften all our edges so that no one can get hurt? Well, I decided to deliberately leave them really pointy, okay, because there was a statement to be made. The name of it is the more beautiful, the more danger. Because actually, when you look at, right, when you see or fish and all those things under the sea, the more beautiful they are, the further you better get from them, okay? And you gotta be real careful not to hurt yourself with this piece. Well, this person that I knew, she came up to my booth and she's like, how much? Right? And I told her the price, which I no longer remember. And she goes, okay, I want it. I said, you know, you're going to get hurt with this and definitely don't hug people. She's like, I'm okay with that. And she took it. There's more to this story, but I can't tell you the rest till we go to the next slide. Okay. And then this one here is called Living to a Crusty Old Age. And I was able to really make the metal look old and crusty. And that's because I felt like there wasn't going to be much in the ocean that could live to a crusty old age if we don't let, get our acts together and keep the oceans nice and clean. So this one was purchased by the same woman, okay? And those were spent drill bits that I soldered in, and they stick way out. And again, you can't even get close with this one, but she had to have that one too. I had to wonder about her life, where she wants all the pointy, dangerous ones. So, and the name of it is called Spent, because again, I use spent drill bits to discuss the fact that I feel like our oceans are being spent with the lack of care. And I know you all know about the massive amount of plastics that float in our ocean and the ocean life that definitely are not happy. But these, as you can see, these were from Haeckel's book. And I looked at those and saw, oh, spent drill bits. That's got to be that. As soon as I saw the picture, I knew what that was going to be made from. I was like, it's something to do with all those spent drill bits. I'm getting a sizable collection again, so I may make spent too. Okay, so the next series I moved on to was my State of the Earth series. And this was where I had a major departure because I started to decide I wanted to use graphite, but I knew very little about how to use graphite with enamel. And but I was willing to take a dive. There was nothing I could find about it anywhere, no matter how much I Googled. You couldn't really find much about graphite with enamel. So I was like, oh, no, I'm just going to try that out. And this picture was something that I had found in, I think it was in the American Craft magazine. And I had a book of old drawings of things I wanted to draw, but I never saw anything like it in enamel. So I was not sure if it was even possible. And then this is an encaustic piece, to the best of my knowledge, that was for sale, I guess, in the Penland Gallery. It was an ad in the magazine. And I looked at that and I'm like, that looks very much like my drawings. And I said, if she can do that in encaustic, I'm going to figure out how to do my drawings in enamel. But I didn't know how to do it anyway, except with a pencil, because I always draw with a pencil in my book. And so but I knew it was possible, I just didn't know how. So I decided to try, and while you can see my drawings, you could see them better now. What I didn't understand was how the heat cut off for graphite, before there's degradation in the drawings and the fading and lots of other things that go wrong. But not anymore, because now I know all about how to control graphite. But you can still see them. And these were multiple firings to keep redrawing. I had to keep redrawing to get them dark enough. Now I'll be teaching how you get it right on one shot. So instead of multiple 7 firings or something, But anyway, you can see this one I called Nuclear Winter, because when it was done, it just reminded me of the sun and the sky, and it felt so white, and all I could think of was the nuclear power plant that exploded in Russia. I'm forgetting what was the name of that town. Chernobyl. Thank you. And then my middle one is polar ice caps do shrink it, which we all know to be true. And I named that one after Rachel Carson because after I did the piercing and I looked at it, I was like, this is very spring-like to me. It just felt very floral, like things were coming to life. So I decided I would name it after Rachel Carson's book. And one of the things I was telling Pamela and maybe someone else earlier, that I suffer from sensory overload. Anything I look at, I see a setting. I know that sounds crazy, but I can look at windows and I'll tell you how to turn that window design into a setting for an enamel piece. I have this constant overload of settings everywhere I look. And so I took a look at this piece of sculpture, again, I think in American Craft Magazine, and I saw that typewriter thing in the center. I'm like, oh, setting! Okay. And then I saw her leg and I'm like, setting! And I made this setting, I made this setting. Well, I mean, I decided after I started, there was no way I was going to pierce that many rectangles. It was torture. So I kind of scaled it back to that number of piercings. And, but that is completely driven by that typewriter thing there. And the name of this was actually the first one in that State of the Earth series. And the name of it, sorry, from above, this is what I see. So basically, whatever your belief system is for a power greater than us, that's a vision of chaos from above. So I sold this piece and I regret it I'll probably regret it till the day I die, because this is my favorite piece I ever made, still, even after all these years. This was made in, I don't know, forget what year I started, it was 12 or 13. So I have the lady's name. If I could ever track her down, I would ask to buy it back, because I would really like to own it. But anyway, this is how my brain works all the time. Just constant desire to make more settings. So here was the next series, which was my Cracked and Stained series. Again, you can see it's all about the polar ice caps and the glaciers melting. And those are two of the pieces that were made from these pictures. That's the piece I actually drew at the piece of paper based on that. And then I translated it onto that there. This black stuff is actually stovepipe. You know, I live in Vermont, so there's lots of spare stovepipe after we work on the chimneys and stuff. So I was like, oh, let's just use that. I love that stuff. And that's my daughter's string drawings right there. I've always wanted to do something with it, but I didn't know what, and I held on to it for years. And then I saw this article, and this guy here was skiing, and he said that the summary is that this is right outside a big ski resort that was built, but he didn't want to ski at the ski resort. He preferred, the woods skiing. And so you can see the crossover and how this looks with this. I saw that and I was like, okay, now I know what I'm going to do. And these were the pieces that I made based on the ice formations and everything else that I saw there. And this one is the one that's named after, just outside lurks what's left, meaning all of this was clear cut to build this ski resort, and he was skiing what was left. So that was one named after that. You can see it also has the biggest resemblance to it. I'm a big Dr. Seuss fan. I don't own any Dr. Seuss books, so everything I draw is kind of from memories of things I remember from Dr. Seuss. And so these are all Dr. Seussian for me. And but this one is actually not this one. I feel like, you know how you've heard stories about frogs that live near chemical plants and they get 8 legs and all that and stuff. So I'm like, strange life forms are bound to happen is what I'm talking about with, with pollution that occurs on a regular basis. And that one, I actually kept that piece. I wrote, how would Dr. Seuss explain it? I'm wondering how Dr. Seuss would explain what's going on to kids now. He's not alive anymore, of course, but I wonder how he would do that. So that's why I named it that. So this piece here was sent to the Philadelphia Museum of Art permanent collection. And it's a pretty strong piece, except for the darn stone. I like specimens, but they're not very strong. And so I remember when the National Arts Foundation first bought it from me, that I said to them, there's nothing you have to worry about this piece except the stone. Guard it with your life. And anyway, this picture drove the drawings, and I call it, I named it Snakes in the River because of all of the poisoning that's done to rivers. And so I feel that the snakes are the corporations that are poisoning our rivers. And so my work has always been about the environment, but I just started becoming so upset with what was going on with humanity and the way people were treating each other. And I deviated slightly to make some social commentary. And I felt like this piece here was, I did a series of bowls, and some of them were segmented like this. I consider these segmented because you see how they're just all connected only in the center there. So it's kind of segmented. And the center looks like a brain. And when I was a kid, what I used to do was hold my breath underwater. And I always discovered that if you ran out of oxygen, you could just blow out. And that was the last you had. So I said, okay, blowing out buys time when you are drowning. And I feel like, there's so much that you can kind of figure out what I'm saying when I say drowning. I feel like we're drowning in every aspect of our lives, be it socially, be it environment. I'm a Debbie Downer. You can see that, but I can't help it. This is what drives my work. And again, this is part of that because this is a social commentary. See, are we segmented or are we actually segregated? Is what I feel like. If you view the way society is structured throughout many cities in the world, and our country especially, it's almost segregation, not segmentation. So, but I still consider them segments because I only left little tiny bits of metal to hold each little piece. This is all pierced, it's not soldered. But I left little pieces for each so-called segment. And then you notice how I did it in like fractals and stuff. I just felt like it kind of conveyed what I was trying to say. And I cannot comment on anybody's political views, and you're all entitled, but since I'm the one talking, we get to talk about mine. And I was very upset when Trump decided to declassify some of the areas that Obama had protected out west. And so I made these two pieces, and one of them was treasure it while you can, because you might think it's safe, and then all of a sudden it's not safe. And basically, when it's unprotected, it's available to the highest bidder. Is what happens. They start trying to sell it off or auction or whatever. This piece here, I had gotten this little fan blower thing out of a scrap pile at the metal yard. Never knew what I was going to do with it. I just loved looking at it. And then one day this hit me. I was like, oh, we're blowing it on this planet. That's what's going with that piece I've been holding all along. And lucky for me, it was accepted to an exhibition, and then the University of Arkansas bought it. Woo! So now it's in their permanent collection. But again, I use circles and things that go around and around as me talking about chaos and things that aren't going well. And this is the piece that I was telling you about with the coral. And I made this in 2022 for a bowl exhibition. And I call the ocean as a sacred space to me. and it's the coral connection. The pink represents the coral. This just is giving you water, the illusion of water and bubbles and ocean life underneath. And I'm a torch fire. I don't use a kiln. So that means my flame has to be on one side of your piece at all times. And when you have to fire a bowl as long as I have to as a torch fire, minimum 45-minute firing with a torch each time, you start to destroy the counter enamel. But I knew it would be the perfect look for coral bleaching. So I said, you know what, this is going to go great with my piece. So after it was all done, it was black. It didn't look this way. But if you put acid on it and let the acid sit for a while and take it off, you then get that look. It's very like stone looking, like almost like dead coral looks like. And I said, this is the perfect look for the back of the bowl. So you can see they are markedly different, the front and the back. Because as long as the torch flame doesn't touch your enamel, nothing will ever happen to it. It's only when the flame hits it that it gets distorted. So this is the piece, and the Enamel Arts Foundation bought it for the permanent collection.
And how large is that?
It's about 7 inches. That's all about the maximum I can get with a torch before I just can't manage anymore. And the reason the holes are there, partially because I wanted them to as a bubble look, but they're super functional because I have to hold this, I have to suspend it, right? Get the flame under it. My trivet points go into those holes to help balance and keep it up above so I can get the flame underneath it. So yeah, I actually can't do anything that size without holes placed throughout it. I can't fire it. So any bowl I make, or you noticed all of them, those segmented ones, they all had holes, and it's because it's a dual function. I can't make them without it. And that's the end. Any questions? Yes, Chris.
I love how you have the backside of that piece. What do the backsides of your other pieces look like?
Well, they're almost all set, so you wouldn't see the back anyway.
Okay, set meaning?
Into a jewelry piece, like there's a plate behind it, so you can't see the back.
Okay.
And I would say 90 to 95% of mine, you can't see the back. The bowls, let me go forward. I think I can show you. So you can sort of see it under here. I used a transparent tealish color, but because these are like arms, they don't get the amount of heat that solid mass does.
Right.
So I can take my flame. You still have to constantly circle. The reason it takes so long, guys, is because you can't let any part of it start to get too cool or it cracks. So I have to constantly keep the flame going back to all the places I'm not working on to keep them hot enough so that they won't crack in the firing process. And if I can't do it, I have to rig up something over it to contain the heat, which means I lose all my visibility, which is not good for a torch fire. A kiln fire knows what temperature they're at and everything. They can control. I have no control. So this one here, I did eventually have to put a giant can over it to contain the heat long enough, because some of the legs would start to the counter enamel. The enamel side doesn't crack, it's the counter enamel side that cracks. And so but I just heat one at a time to get it to flow. So it goes quick. It's much quicker.
The next slide shows the back side.
Yeah, it's the same. You can see it. I said,
Counter enamel.
that's the enamel on the back side that keeps the front side from cracking. So it's a support system because it's on metal, and this is kind of technical, but metal and glass do not expand and contract at the same rate. No, nothing even remotely similar. So what'll happen is if you don't encase the metal in glass on both sides, the metal's going to control and the glass is going to crack. So that's why you need enamel on both sides to keep it from cracking until the metal gets really, really thick. And then the reason it doesn't crack easily is because it has so much mass and it holds the heat so much longer that the two of them can start to cool at the same rate because the glass is thin and the metal is thick. So
What metal do you use?
Copper.
Always copper.
Me, yes. Not everybody, but me, yes. Not all metal can be enamel, but a fair number can. You know, steel can be, iron can be, fine silver, not sterling. You can do sterling, but you have to depletion gild it and get a layer of fine silver on the surface before gold. Brass is challenging, but if you can deplete the get brass and get a copper layer, you might have a better chance at it. Yes.
Since I got here so late, did you say how you decided to be torch enameler rather than?
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Thanks for asking that. I was a glass bead maker, so I was used to working with torches. And when I took my enamel workshop with Linda Daugherty in 2007, I walked in there knowing that if I pursued this, I was going to use a torch. I already owned. Yeah, I already owned. I already knew how to do some metalsmithing, not a lot. I'd only learned a year or two before that, but I still had an acetylene torch to do my soldering. So I was like, well, I know that'll work with this. So I was set. Instead of having to go out and buy a whole kiln. No. So
That's so different when you put a kiln process and see.
yeah, you know, it serves its purpose. I can't disrespect the kiln. If I do ever get one, I want a Bicella. I want to go for the gold, but but that's probably not going to happen for a while unless I get a grant that buys it for me. Because they're now over $2,000.
So you'd be interested in learning it, or you know it already? But
Oh, I know it.
More affinity for torch.
I just love using a torch. The thing is, there are things you can't really do very well with a torch, but there are things you can do with a torch you cannot do with a kiln. Like if I want to have a piece that where one section is very high fired and another section isn't, piece of cake. Can't do that with a kiln. It's too even. So I can really control color and stuff better than the kiln can. So, but you know, I'm size limited. Yeah, that's the biggest drawback side.
Brains always make you more creative.
Yeah, I guess so.
No matter what we do.
Yeah. Any more questions? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, do you fool around with oxidation reduction? Like sometimes go reducing and sometimes go oxidizing?
Well, sometimes you get stuck with that even if you don't want it. So when you fire, like say inside a can, if you, which is what I'll be teaching, if you are warming your piece for too long, you're going to start having a reduction in environment happening in there, and you'll get sort of a metallic sheen on the top of the enamel, which if it's only a little bit is attractive. If it's too much, it's kind of ugly in my opinion, because it kind of masks all the underlying work you were trying to do. But that doesn't happen with everything. That happens with liquid enamel more than it happens with other enamels.
Say that was brand specific?
Brand,
What enamels it happens more with?
liquid,
Oh, liquid.
sorry. Yeah, it happens more with liquid enamels than than sifting enamels.
Do you have a preference?
So with your collections, you have such like intentional collections. So what determines like when you feel like it's complete enough to like?
I go back and forth to collections. So like you saw that one, the very last one that was the Sacred Spaces, I'd made the other one several years earlier. So I never close a series. I just kind of move on to something else that's with, I have these, like I said, I have these constant mind disturbances. And so whichever one is winning out the time when I'm making my work, that's the one I go on to that time. And I try to make more than one just for efficiency purposes. That's my only reason for trying to do more than one at a time, is because I have very little time to make bodies of work. So if I'm going to start, let's just dive into 4 at one time, because there's nothing like the feeling of finishing 4 at the same time.
So sometimes you'll like, let's say you release it, you'll go back to that if you get re-inspired by it and release something.
If something's bugging me again, yeah, I'm going back. The nuclear series never ends. Started in 2010, and there's one that's not, and yeah, I can't put everything, but There was one that I made called 61 and Counting Down. It's a bowl that I made in 2018, and I started that series in 2010. So yeah, I go back. The nuclear series is probably the most powerful series for me in terms of draw, because it's sgraffito, and I always have something I want to do in sgraffito. So that's why I end up going back to that one again. Yeah.
You have a preference between the two kinds of, like you said, liquid and powder? And
Sifting and
sifting, and their different properties are different?
Oh, yeah, in my opinion, yeah, because when I paint down liquid enamel, my intention is to be able to bring colors from the copper into the liquid enamel, which is not easy, real easy to do with the sifting enamels without substantial overfiring because it's thicker. The liquid I deliberately want very thin, so I can also do very thin drawings with my scratching tools. I don't want to do any of that. It just, I guess, depends. I love to draw though. So I love pencil drawing and then doing the painting enamels with it to complete the idea that I have. So I love them both. I can't say I like one better than the other. Maybe one day I will.
No, but you use them differently.
I do, but more and more lately, the reason I use them so differently is I actually didn't feel like I understood my work well enough to take the drawings I did with sgraffito and turn them into using them for painting enamels. I've gotten to the point now where I'm almost like interchangeable. I can take the drawings either way now and do the drawings that I used to save for this. I can switch them back and forth. Like here, look at this earring. You see how, and you see how much it resembles that same kind of thing. So I feel like I can do it now. I couldn't at first. My mind couldn't figure it out, and it has to do with the color, not the drawing. I didn't know how to because the colors are very different. Painting enamels are opaque, and I use transparent enamels when I do sgraffito. And to me, they don't look alike, and I didn't know how to translate that in my brain. So that's what it's taken me probably more than 10 years to figure it out.
Impressive. So in a piece like this that looks so complex, would you be applying all your colors at once, or is it?
I did.
Why?
I did. And I don't, what I did for this bowl, and it's not very common that I do this. I actually drew a drawing. It's like, sort of a drawing where I just sort of drew. I didn't pierce that same drawing, but I just made the idea of the cells, so to speak. And then I took my pencil and I just started to make some lines on it. And I was like, okay, I got this. I mean, I never finished it. I just did a few lines and I was like, I understand what I want to do. And then when I did pierce out the ball and sifted down the white, I took my graphite pencil, and that's when I really embellished and put a lot of lines, but I don't plan the colors. I do it spontaneously. I look at it and then I decide, okay, where to put the colors. The first few colors I do, I just randomly place without thinking. And after I get past a couple colors, then I really start to think, okay, does that color work on that spot or not? From my perspective, someone else might look at it and say, oh man, you blew it, but we all have our own preferences and no one's right. It's just what we align with. And I love to shade. That's one thing I love to do. I love to shade with pencils. That's why I wanted to use pencils too. I wanted to shade. I don't know a lot about drawing. I couldn't draw a realistic thing if my life depended on it. I can't even. As a matter of fact, I am the last person chosen in Pictionary because of my superior stick drawings. That's as good as I get. Stick drawings that are so bad that even my own kids don't want me on their team.
And do you ever, I'm sorry, do you ever, go ahead. No.
Okay, one strike.
Do you ever make, happy pieces?
Aren't they happy when you look at it?
They're beautiful.
Right, but that's the thing.
The meaning to you is so important and dire in ways.
But the thing about it is, you notice how they're all kind of pretty?
They're beautiful.
But that invites a conversation. because they look at it and they go, God, this is beautiful.
So
And
they
a
don't-
lot of times they'll say, does it have a meaning? And then I get to talk about it
Right,
because they like the way I put the color. It's very interesting. I didn't plan that at
yeah,
all, but I realized that my sense of color was attractive. I learned that from making beads, that people liked my sense of color. And so I said, maybe I can translate that into my enamel. And then people ask questions and I get to talk about it. Do I make happy pieces? I look at
I
them and
guess
they,
it all starts from a drawing, so I guess do you ever doodle other things besides the kind of topics in your series?
no,
That's okay, yeah, just curious,
no, I don't.
yeah.
Anything I doodle is actually probably gonna head toward that drawing book. I have so many loose pages in my drawing book from, Charles Rennie McIntosh, right? I was looking in one of his books the other night. Remember I said I was looking, because I own some Charles Rennie McIntosh. You had one I didn't have. I opened it up and I'm not a big fan of a lot of his work, but there was one page in that book that had a very light drawing that he made with very few minimal lines on it. Okay. And I'm like, that is awesome. And I took what I was looking at, whatever it is, I'm not even sure. And I took my drawings and I added something that I hadn't thought to do. And which was, I'll show it to you. It's on the table inside. It won't make sense, but I can show you my enamel pieces, the ones I already made, and what I added from looking at his one little drawing. But it's all gonna end up translating into my work. Everything that I draw, I know.
So that person who told you way back at the beginning, you have to make a series, you have to, that really
For
stuck.
jurying,
Yeah,
for jurying, you have to have a
It's
series, a
very
cohesive
powerful.
group. Right.
And that's kept with your work all these years. Everything kind of falls into.
What I would have done though, had that person not said this, I would have chosen my 4 or 5, depending on the show you're doing, best pieces, which would have probably been from all different series, and I would get into nothing. Even though they were probably better than any 5 that might be from the same series, because they can't think that fast in their 5 seconds. They have to make a yes, no, or a score from 1 to 5 in 5 seconds. How do you do that? Okay, and some it's less than 5 seconds.
Yeah, well,
Those are the lucky jurors.
well, they are powerful when you show them as a body of work.
Right.
When you have, and when we hear the stories behind them.
They don't ever get to hear the stories.
More,
They take
yeah.
more than 5 seconds.
What's that?
The stories take more than.
Yeah. So, yeah. So did you both ask your question?
No, my question, relates specifically to, the white and black pieces.
Just the graphite and
Yes, the graphite and the white, and I wonder if, with enameling, we think so much of it, has to do with color. And
Like
yet
those.
these pieces are so striking. And I wonder if this is kind of a progression for you. Did you have to get to a point in your technique that you could do something this subtle and have it be this impactful?
this is later than the ones that had color.
Yes,
Like by 2 years.
yes.
Because
Yeah.
this was the beginning. Let me just see something. Yeah, so this section right here was probably drawn somewhere between 10 and 20 times. Yeah, this piece was fired at least 20 times. And that's because this section up here where the yellow is, I would stone it off because you fire it that many times and the yellow will turn brown. And the red will turn brown, and that would make the piece hideous to me. So I would stone it off and start that part again, but that minute negatively impacted, they had to go to maturity. Graphite never wants to go to maturity. So I kept ruining the drawings. So I had to keep stoning that area down and redrawing, because you have to have a matte surface to draw with graphite. So I had to keep stoning that off and redrawing and redrawing. Once you get the things that go to maturity right, and you never have to go back, Then I didn't know in 2012 about that you had to stop at the sugar fire temperature to keep your graphite intact. 2 more years later, I figured that out. These are 2014, those are 2012. Yeah, and
These
so
just,
and
These
this was probably, that might have been the first one, which is not as good, as those. You see the difference? Yeah. Especially that one. This is the best of all of them. And I'm gonna tell you something. This ring right here, I own that ring. But it's a story that I can't remember related to it, but somehow somebody wanted to buy 2 rings. And when they got sent to the people, they decided they didn't like certain things about either the fit was wrong, and somebody didn't like, one was too fancy for them. They sent it back. They wanted a plain ring. So throughout all of it, and then maybe it got dropped. I don't remember in detail, but something happened in this section right here that the enamel cracked. And it only would crack if it got dropped. Okay, so I took it apart. I actually took that piece out. I had to resolder in the prongs because you can't just open up the prongs and reuse them. So I resoldered the prongs and I remade that piece. Looks almost identical. I can tell you that the piece, I remade that even a couple years after that. It's like 100 times better than that original. Because even then, when I thought I was really pretty good at it, I'm nowhere near as good then as it's 10 years later. Okay. And then I remade it in maybe 17 or 18 or something. So I had a lot more skills on it.
And this is mounted in silver with.
This is all sterling that's been liver sulfured and gold, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I kept that ring, so I decided, I don't care who wants this ring, I want it. It fits my finger. I'm so skinny and I got the fattest fingers on a skinny person. I mean, my fingers are like size 8. Any other questions?
Do you ever use underglazed pencils?
I actually don't use underglazed
But they work.
pencils. Oh, yeah, but you can't get a real sharp point, and that's why I don't use them. I'm experimenting with how to get better points on this, because if I could get better points, I would probably use them more often, but I can get really sharp points with graphite. And that's how I became a graphite user as opposed to an underglazed pencil user. But I convert underglazes to overglazes all the time. That I definitely do.
What brands and types of enamels do you use? You have to go and do all these tests to find out your shrinkage compatibilities and stuff, or you just.
No. First of all, there are tables out there for that. I only use Thompson enamels and Mason stains that I convert to overglazes. But I don't use any leaded enamels. Thompson has a chart that tells you the COE of every sifting enamel that they make, not the liquids or anything, but the sifting enamels. You can look up the COEs. But if you use their counter enamel, what they call counter enamel, anyone who's a metalsmith or has mixed things, it's not a solid, it's not one enamel. It's a mixture of enamels, which makes it stronger than it, just like when we alloy metals, right? Sterling's stronger than soft fine silver, right? Brass is stronger than copper. When you alloy them, they get stronger. Kind of the same with glass. You mix several of them together, you get a stronger counter enamel. Does it have the identical COE as the one on the other side? No, it cannot possibly. But I have never had a problem with a piece when I use their counter enamel as counter enamel. I've had other problems when I don't use that, but not if I use it's called CE3. If you use CE3, I've never had a problem.
Have you moved?
From where, Vermont?
No, from where the
Where the nuclear
where
plant
the
is.
original nuclear.
Yes, we don't live there anymore. No, but when I moved to Vermont, I actually chose where I bought my house west of the only remaining nuclear power plant that was in southern Vermont in the southeast part. And I moved to the west with a mountain range in between because the winds also blow east, not west. And, it was more than 50 miles away. So, I live in Vermont, Hubbardton. But that nuclear power plant has been closed now for at least 10 years, but they still don't know what to do with the spent fuel rods and all that stuff. That's still a problem. Yeah.
Forever. I just wanted to know, what do you like the least about Enameling and what do you like the most about Enameling?
The least? I don't have enough time for it, maybe, because it is a labor of love, because everything takes a long time. What I like the most? Wow, no one ever asked me that before. What do I like the most about enamel? You know what? It's a canvas. It's a canvas for my drawings. And I have a goal of making bigger pieces, so I have a bigger canvas to draw. I could draw on paper, I could draw all those places, and sometimes drawing on paper is more satisfactory in one sense only. I'm used to working with paper, and so what you do with your writing implement mirrors what I'm trying to do. So if I take a fine pen or a fine pencil, I can get these fantastic lines. It's harder to keep that replicated in enamel. And so it makes me strive to achieve what I'm trying to do even more. I work really hard to solve things that, one of the reasons I decided to use Mason stains instead of Thompson's painting enamels was I was so tired of having a limited palette range. It's more work to use Mason stains, and I didn't know anybody at that point, and I still don't, who took their Mason stains and converted them to overglazes. Everybody I know who used Mason stains used them as the same way a potter would use a Mason stain. Okay, thin layers, things about anything. This is a little bit made it complicated or more you want to know, but anything that's considered an underglaze, like a Mason stain, can only adhere to the glass surface. If you put anything thicker than that, what can actually touch the glass will wash off after firing. Okay, so I didn't like that. I didn't like that I would spend all that time to paint what I wanted to paint, and a whole bunch of it would wash off. So I said, I have to change that. I'm going to add glass, turn this to an overglaze so that it won't wash off when I'm done. You sacrifice firing ranges though. Underglazes can take a lot of heat. Overglazes start to become enamels where they can't take as much heat, and you can sacrifice color degradation and all that. But I always fire to sugar fire temperature, and nothing suffers. No color, no nothing. You just can never have it glossy, which suits me perfectly fine. I like matte looking things. So if you like glossy, you may have to ask me some more questions, and I may have to tell you, solutions. But if you like matte, nothing ever goes wrong. Nothing. Any other questions? Surely you haven't run out yet. No, I'm just kidding. Tomorrow you can ask more if you're in the workshop. Yeah.
So how are you breaking up what you're covering in the 2 days? Like graphite is one of them, firing to sugar is another, painting with earth.
The first thing I teach is scriptito. So that's where we start. 2 days is really hard to convey a lot of information. So that's why I'm going to encourage you, please use the sample copper pieces we give you. Don't waste any time on blanks. Just take them and try the techniques. Don't get fancy. Don't feel like you got to leave with a Rembrandt. Okay. Try and just absorb the technique. You'll be given by email. I'll get everybody's email from everyone that's here. And I will send you all documents with step-by-step instructions for sgraffito, step-by-step instructions for graphite. So if you forget, because we're going to be cramming a bunch of info in, you have your documents to go back to look at. And that will help you. That answer you. And then after we're done with sgraffito, then we move on to graphite. And then We usually have very little time to do the painting part, but you at least get to watch it and see that it's not very difficult. It's just, once you know what to do, you just have to do it. You know, and you'll have your own vision for what you want your work to look like. But once you know how to do it, it's actually the reason I leave it for last, it's easier than sgraffito.
Will the information that you forward to us also cover transforming the Mason stains?
No. That's just way too much. That's way too much. I teach a whole an entire workshop just on Mason stains. I teach a 6-hour virtual workshop where all they do is watch on Mason stains. Not just Mason stains, it's the combination with graphite, but it's a 6-hour workshop, so it's a lot of work. A lot to pass on. But I gave you the nutshell version here of what you can do with Mason stains to make them function as enamels. Just add glass. But see, that's a whole big discussion too. I actually have a number of glasses I have to test at home. I have been using one specific one. Now I have a couple more I have to test because I'm trying to find a cheaper source.
And then can you talk just a little bit about the torch firing versus kiln work? Because you came to it via beadworking and the immediacy of being able to
My real reason was because I didn't want to buy a kiln.
because you didn't want to back.
That was my real reason. I didn't want to go spend $1,000 on a kiln.
But do you still feel, after having made that choice, do you still feel that you this gives you a wider set of options?
Oh, I think so. Yes, absolutely. And I mean, certainly nothing I ever planned, but I'm actually probably the most well-known torch firer in the country. Who would have ever thought that? Someone asked me about the can. Was it you, Lori? Somebody asked me about the can that was here earlier. How did I come to use that can as like a mini kiln? I said, oh, that's a really funny story. And I said, I'll tell you when I get back. And I don't remember who asked me, but Deb Lozier is from California, and she was the only torch fire I'd ever heard of. And I had seen a picture of what I thought her using a can to fire her enamels in. It turned out, and I wrote to her to ask her what kind of a can she used or something. I don't even remember what she said to me at this point. But I just decided I would go get the right size can for what I wanted to do. Turned out the reason she had a can, which I thought she was using to fire inside of, she actually uses the can pointing up, and she notched the can so she could put something across in the notches for something she was firing. I didn't know what. Okay, she told me, but it was nothing like what I was doing. But I never knew that. All I asked her about was what kind of can was she using, and she said, answered me somehow. Maybe she said a soup can or whatever. I was like, who could fit a piece inside a soup can? I'm going to get a bigger can than that. But it turned out that she didn't know I was trying to use it as a mini kiln. And I just had the idea of seeing a can sitting there like, oh, that'd be a good idea, thinking I'm copying from her, but I wasn't copying from her at all. And I didn't even know it for years because I didn't meet her for, I don't know, 10 years after I asked her that question. I asked her in 2007 and I met her in 2017. So 10 years later, I found out from her. She's like, I never used that to fire inside. I'm like, you did? All this time I used to tell people I gave her full credit for the idea. And it was but I will never not be a torch firer. I might supplement my firing with a kiln, but I will never not be a torch firer. For me, I don't care how much practice I get. I would prefer to do all this sugar firing and everything right in front of my eyes. I can see it perfectly. I can stop instantly. I don't have to stand in front of a kiln and open the door with the heat blast. No, I can see it right in front of me.
Yeah.
And I will never, I don't think anything would change me unless the piece was too large for me to do it. And then I'd have to use a kiln. Cool.
Would there be a project where you could use both, like together?
You mean like partially fire?
Fire in the kiln and then do some torch.
Oh, absolutely. People do that all the time.
Yeah.
That is done a lot, actually. There's a lot of well-known enamelists who might do a certain part of their work with the torch. But the vast majority of it's done with the kiln, but sometimes they just have something they need to do that will be expedited with the torch that won't leave any negative impact on the piece.
Which did you prefer, the kiln or the?
Oh, I don't know, but depend on what they were doing. It might just
Oh,
be
you
somewhere in the
kidding me?
middle. Yeah,
So you're saying it doesn't matter, you could do.
you can go back and forth.
kiln first, or you could do the torch first and then the kiln, or either way, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, if I was gonna make a bowl, let's say, that needs the kiln, it's too large, I could still fire the counter enamel with a torch. Because as long as there's no enamel on one side, it fires very easily and very quickly. It's only once you have counter enamel on it that the whole world changes. So I could still partially use my torch.
I got some sake, guys.
I want to buy some. Can I buy some from you?
We're hoping to do a workshop, but
Oh,
welcome to experiment.
oh,
Yeah, there you go. We were so delighted that so many people responded so positively to this. We're really looking forward to it.